Spencer has gotten up from his chair and I can hear a car alarm in the background. I hope everything's okay.
Welcome back to the R&S Podcast. This is episode 6, and this week the R stands for Randy and the S stands for Savage. How are you doing today, Randy?
Doing pretty good, Savage. I have just gotten back from a long family trip for Christmas, so I am ready to go again.
Well, that's
Not
good.
go again as in take a trip again, as in like record again.
Oh, okay. Well, look, I just gotta say, I'm a little insulted for your mispronunciation of my name. It's Savage.
Oh no, it is Savage. I apologize, Mr. Oppress. I will go kill myself real quick.
Oh no.
Brother.
Oh no. Did a night sister just walk in?
I hope not.
Yeah. So this week, this is a first for us. There's no new content for us to talk about. So this week we've decided that we're going to go through our rankings of The Mandalorian. So this is ranking our all the episodes from our least favorite to most favorite.
Yeah, since both seasons have ended, we have a full list of Mandalorian episodes that won't soon change. So we've gone through and ranked them, and we want to see how yours line up with ours.
Yeah, so we just want to talk about them from least favorite to most favorite. Talk about some trends we noticed. Right off the bat, some of these episodes were kind of hard to rank. Like going through, you'll see where there's some episodes where it's just like, that was a great episode. Why is it ranked 9th? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, personally, the way that I see it is my top little spoiler into mine. My top 13 and my bottom 3. All of the ones. I mean, there are no bad Mandalorian episodes, as we said earlier in one of the other episodes. There are just ones that are a bit less good in our eyes. Like, one of the episodes in rank 13 for me is still an episode that I love. But there are just so many more that I love just a little bit more,
Oh, yeah. So the last episode that came out, which was The Rescue, since the episode aired, do you have any, second thoughts about it?
No, just rewatching it for the ranking, I definitely agree with your point of some of the things that were wrong in the beginning of the episode. I had some of my issues with it. The way that I did my ranking was I would just kind of write things down about the episode as I went through, just in case I wanted to look back over it, besides watching the whole episode again. And I definitely agree things like, where did Dr. Pershing come from? Why is there suddenly this massive focus on Bo-Katan can't take the Darksaber? Stuff like that. But that didn't really affect my ranking of the episode. I still loved the rest of the episode, and my ranking is, of course, subjective.
Yeah, and last week I was talking about how I was really bothered, or kind of a little disappointed with Luke Skywalker being in the episode. And since going back and rewatching it, I've watched it 3 times now. I watch it each time an episode comes out. I watch it twice on the day of release. One at 4 a.m. an hour after the episode comes out, and then one later in the day with my girlfriend because she's a big Star Wars nerd too. And then so I of course took the time to go back and watch it again. I was just like, yeah, I do kind of like it. At the end, I'm still a little disappointed that it's Luke, but it's still like last time, it doesn't bother me that much. It doesn't make me hate the show for it.
Yeah, and the first time that we see something is always going to be very big highs, big lows. I mean, the first time that we see the Mandalorian episode every week, there's going to be some big highs and big lows because we're all, on high adrenaline for a new Mandalorian episode. But going back through and watching it again, you can kind of look at it with a more objective brain to help you create your subjective list, if that makes any sense. For example, some things where I was super excited to see something, and then going back through and watching it again, I was like, well, that was because of the adrenaline. It was still cool, just not, as cool as I thought it was, or maybe there was some context I was missing, such as the discussion we had last week about Dr. Pershing.
Well, with that being said, should we dive into these rankings?
Let's go on in.
Okay, so I think that for most people in the show, everyone knows what the worst 2 episodes of the show are. I think it's all subjective, which one is not as good as the other one. So I am in the camp that for me, my least favorite episode is The Passenger.
Same here. That is number 16 on my list.
And so let me guess, number 15 for you is Gunslinger?
No, actually. We'll get into that later, but
oh,
yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's a big shock.
Yeah.
So let's talk about The Passenger. So The Passenger was chapter 10 of the series. in what was a huge action-packed and story-filled season 2. This one was the outlier where not really much happened. This episode was written by Jon Favreau and directed by Peyton Reed. This was Peyton Reed's first episode of season 2. We then found out about 24 hours before the season finale that the season finale, The Rescue, was directed by Peyton Reed. For me, there's some great action sequences. I didn't hate Frog Lady. One of the most underrated moments of the season for me was when she activated the droid from the Prisoner episode of season 1, and she was just like, "Hey, buddy, you said you were gonna get me to my husband. I thought Mandalorians were people of their word." So I thought that was really cool, but I had a lot of problems with the episode. Basically, I'd say all the quote unquote filler episodes in Mandalorian, at least something happens. I can describe everything important that happens in this episode in 3 words, and it is go to Trask. That's it.
Yeah, like I was thinking about it too. If you ended from the Marshal and jumped right into the R&S, you would just think, oh, he got off Tatooine. Like, there's a little bit of connective tissue in the passenger to say, here is how we got from Tatooine to Trask. Otherwise, it's just cold spiders with a frog lady who runs weird.
Yeah, and this episode, we see the return of Trapper Wolf and Carson Teva. So, I mean, that's cool. And I will say, I really liked how there may not have been a lot of connective tissue with the overall story of season 2 and The Passenger, but with The Passenger, there was a lot of connective tissue between this episode and The Prisoner from season 1, which is really cool, but also, like, you would think you wouldn't expect that because there's a lot of connection between The Prisoner and The Believer because both are directed by Rick Famuyiwa. But it's interesting to see a lot of connective tissue from The Passenger to The Prisoner. And also the fact that the New Republic pilots are just like, all right, Mando, piss off. Like, we know what you did on the New Republic prison ship.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I just don't like about the episode. The way that Carson Teva goes, but these are trying times. Like, you're not in a cartoon. You're not. It like that was a little cheesy for me personally. But just real quick, a few things that I did note that I didn't like. I'm actually not a huge fan of. I don't even know her name. The woman with the curly hair on Tatooine.
Pelimoto.
Thank you. I'm not a huge fan of Pelimoto. I'm not a fan that this episode was, of course, pure filler, and Mando just has to transport someone. He's just a taxi service. The whole Baby Yoda being hungry the entire time, it didn't do anything outside of this episode. It was a building thing, was like, haha, funny, he's eating the eggs, and it set up the fact that he ate a spider and sicked the knobby white spiders on them. But that's it. It was a setup for this one specific episode and was never used again, except for, like, maybe the next episode when Mando said, I know you're hungry, because he heard his belly rumble or something.
Yeah, that's interesting that it never came back up. I thought it would in, like, the season finale, but...
Yeah, and the last thing, I personally do not believe that Din would leave Zero on his ship for that long. If he was a droid that he shot and killed, he would have disposed of the trash. I don't believe that Zero would still be on that ship for Frog Lady to translate, but I guess that was just like well, how do we get them to talk? He killed a droid a few, however long it was ago. I believe there's like months, even a year between the seasons. So I really don't believe that Mando would have kept that droid dead on his ship if it's a killer.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was wondering that too. I thought it was a nice callback, but at the same time, like, logically, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. And granted, like, his problem with droids, I guess, is solved after what IG-11 does in the season 1 finale. But at the same time, like, why would he just keep that around,
Yeah, it doesn't. That's a bit of a plot hole there. That's really the only, like, big plot hole that I remember seeing besides the, where did Pershing come from in The Rescue, but that's about it.
So let's move on to number 15. So I've already said mine is The Gunslinger. What's yours?
So mine is actually The Prisoner.
Okay.
My reasoning is because they're both, in my eyes, kind of weird filler episodes where it's like Mando's jumping around doing things just to see more, I guess. There's no, like, story progress there where he goes to see more of where Baby Yoda comes from or is building his bond with Baby Yoda besides just like, hey, don't touch that, that's my kid, or like, basically the same thing in the Gunslinger, where he has to deal with Pelimoto stealing Baby Yoda, basically. So I don't see any story progress there, which isn't inherently a bad thing. It doesn't have to be story progress in an episode for it to be good. The main reason why I don't like The Prisoner is because the cast of characters, of course, aren't supposed to be likable. They're supposed to be annoying. But I don't even like to hate them.
Yeah.
I can deal with Mayfeld in that episode. But everyone else, it just seemed like they're entirely one-dimensional characters. You can kind of see the betrayal happening kind of early because they're laughing a lot at like planning. They know each other very well outside of Mando returning. And there's 2 whole betrayals in this episode, one of which Mando did see. But my absolute least favorite part of this episode is, I don't even remember her name, the purple Twilight girl. Shion was my least favorite part of this whole episode. I could not stand her, and she was in the episode more than I wanted. like I said, I understand she's supposed to be annoying. She's supposed to be this like old person that Mando used to fly with, but I could not stand her the entire episode, and that kind of forced Prisoner down this low on my list. And again, that doesn't mean the entire episode's bad. I love some of the action sequences. I love that Mando becomes like this hunter predator out for these other people on the prisoner ship. I love seeing Anakin Skywalker's voice actor, stuff like that. Like, it's not a bad episode. There are aspects of it that I just can't stand, though.
Yeah, so for me, with rankings from the bottom to top, it goes Passenger, Gunslinger, and Prisoner.
So we just swapped those in our rankings.
Yeah, we swapped those a little bit in our rankings. And for me, it's a lot of the same reason with The Prisoner, where I thought Mayfeld was okay. I thought the rest of the gang, I just didn't really care for them. They're one-dimensional characters. They were just kind of eh.
Yeah.
And the only takeaway I had from The Prisoner was just like, all right, Mando used to hang out with these guys. Maybe they'll be back later. I'm glad that we've seen Mayfeld back so far, and Mayfeld was phenomenal in his second episode.
Yeah, he totally improved.
With the direction the show's going, I don't know if we're going to see the rest of the other characters. I mean, Zero the droid is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Shion and the Deveronian, I guess, are in some other New Republic prison.
Yeah, we didn't see their names pop up in the scrolling prisoners list in Chapter 14.
Yeah.
So I don't imagine that we'll see them again. I hope we don't, because personally, I don't like their characters.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on to the Gunslinger then.
Yeah.
Because as before, like, Gunslinger got swapped around a little bit in our rankings. So for me, the Gunslinger, I thought Pelimoto was okay. I think she just sticks out like a sore thumb because she's the only character in Mandalorian that has this, besides Grief Karga, that has this upbeat, outwardly energetic, extroverted personality. Mm-hmm. So I think she kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. We're not used to it. So she didn't annoy me.
It's like overly heavy-handed comic relief.
Yeah. That's my only problem with it. But this episode just, like, in theory, it all sounds really cool. Mando goes to Tatooine, gets Slave One repaired after this really cool dogfight.
Not Slave One, Razor Crest.
What's that?
You said Slave One.
Oh, sorry. Gets the Razor Crest fixed, leaves the child with someone, goes to find work to pay off his debt for the ship, meets this new young bounty hunter that wants to get in the guild, needs help tracking down an even cooler bounty hunter to capture her. Really awesome fight sequence happens. They get their target, but Mando's betrayed, and he ends up killing the younger bounty hunter. In theory, it all sounds really cool, but the way it played out was just kind of eh.
Yeah.
Like, Pelimoto, she's fine. I'd be fine if we don't see her again. I didn't hate her. But Toro Calican, man.
That was the worst part of the episode for me, too.
Yeah.
In my notes, I'm just like, dude, this kid won't shut up. Or this kid doesn't, like, he's, like, I understand he's a rookie, but, like, you can't be this stupid.
Yeah. The character had severe flaws, and the script writing for him was just really kind of really kind of obvious.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the actor just didn't bring anything memorable to the role. The best part of the episode still was at the end when we see someone approach Fennec, and we're all like, oh, this is probably Boba, but let's theorize about it for a year, see who it could possibly be. Mm-hmm. So at least, like, the one huge positive from this episode is that this is when we first see Fennec Shan.
I mean, I also love seeing Tatooine post Return of the Jedi, seeing just absolutely how anti-Stormtrooper they were with the heads on spikes. You know, seeing sections of the episode where they get to fly around in the Dude Sea on speeder bikes. That was awesome. I love speeder bikes. So yeah, I mean, there are good, as we've been saying, there are good aspects of this episode, but there are also some pretty glaring, not great aspects of this episode too.
And I will also say the action sequence where Din and Toro are on their speeder bikes racing towards Fennec, and they have to alternate the shots with their flares to blind her. That was a really cool action sequence. We haven't seen something like that done in Star Wars either, so I'll give them credit there. But overall, just like I said before, in theory, when you just speak out what happens in the episode, it sounds really cool, but just a lot of the execution was eh.
Yep.
Moving into fourth, so we're about a quarter of the way through, so let's see where we start to differ here a little bit.
I think we're going to be pretty different from here on out, because like we were both saying, it was so close between the rest of these episodes.
Yeah, so for me, in fourth, or I guess 13th place?
Yeah, we'll go 13th place, yeah.
Sure. For me, it's The Child.
Me too, actually.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, someone for being different, jerk. It's not like we're doing this on Google Docs or anything.
No, there's no Google Docs.
So for me, I don't really have any issues with this episode for the most part. So it's just we had this was episode 2 of the whole series where we entered this episode being like, what the heck is going on? Like all of a sudden there's the target is this Yoda-like creature. And so this episode, we have some great moments with Queel, who we just met in the first episode.
Man, I rewatched the season, for this, and I forgot how much I love Queel's character.
I know there's just so much depth to this amazing little Ugnaught, where we find out that he used to be enslaved by the Empire. Now he serves no one. But we have this great sequence where we actually see the Jawas get to do something.
I know. I was so happy to be able to see the Jawas do something besides just say Houdini and then run away in a big old
sandcrawler.
Thank you, sandcrawler. Yeah.
Yeah, and that whole sequence of Din climbing the sandcrawler, you get these Last Crusade Indiana Jones vibes. And then at the end, that big reveal, which we kind of expected, but we're still freaking out to see that the child is force sensitive.
Mm-hmm. And also, there are the scenes where Grogu hops out of his little egg and walks over to try to touch Din. It's foreshadowing to where he can use Force Heal in the season finale.
Right. And so this episode was written by Favreau, directed by Rick Famuyiwa. So this was his first episode he got to direct. It was still a great episode. Mm-hmm. It was short. It's one of the shorter episodes of the series. It's only 30 minutes, but
I besides everything we just talked about, I also love the Mudhorn scene. I always love big old scary monsters in Star Wars, and seeing just how weak Din is without the fancy Beskar to protect him, which is kind of something we see later on in the show too. Yes, he has Beskar. He just relies on the Beskar to block all the stuff, like his run in the R&S where he's just getting hit like crazy, but Beskar resists it. Mm-hmm. So he as a person fighting himself isn't the strongest. I mean, he's very good with weapons, but there's no weapons in this Mudhorn fight. There's no Beskar besides his helmet and the pauldron as well. So you just see how weak he is.
And with that being said, something amazing that we had noticed in the first episode of the show that's really capitalized in this episode, which you already spoke about, was just he is not perfect. And I love seeing a hero in Star Wars that isn't perfect, because let's be honest, almost all the Jedi until Order 66 were damn near perfect. You would never see them miss blocking a laser blast or anything like that. So it's so refreshing to see a hero that's not perfect in combat.
Yeah, the whole show's like that, where not everything's perfect, not everything is one-sided. For example, you never see a gun jam until The Mandalorian. We see it twice later on in season 2, but still, that's kind of the whole show, is not everything in Star Wars is perfect, especially from this point of view here.
All right, so let's move on to the next episode. So I guess this episode then is in 12th place.
Yes, this is 12.
And for me, it's The Mandalorian, chapter 1 of the show.
Mine is The Reckoning, chapter 7.
Okay. So for me, The Mandalorian is down here just because like I thought it was a solid opening to the show. The only like complaint I had was that it kind of felt like the opening sequence was a little long. It was about 15 minutes. The episode was 50 minutes. So I just felt like the opening sequence was a little long, but I thought it was a solid pilot episode. I think infiltrating the combat or the compound and the fight at the end with Din and IG-11 was phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree. I have the Mandalorian at spot 10 on my list.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, like we were saying earlier, so many of these are so close. My order, so I have the Reckoning in 12th, and then the Believer, and then the Mandalorian. And the reason that I have the Mandalorian up a bit higher is just because I loved just how coldly it opens. It sets up the show so well right from the opening second with no music and the bounty tracker. So yeah, I love the way that it opens and the way that it sets up the entire feel of the show. The battles, meeting Queel, meeting how Din works, and how basically almost the main cast of the show in the first season there. And also just seeing how he works with IG-11. It establishes he doesn't like droids. Establishes that he does still care about things though, because he definitely takes out IG-11 to make sure that he can save this sudden thing he's found at the end of the show episode. So I have it a bit higher than the other ones, but they're all about the same. Just had to throw them into a number ranking.
Right. So with that being said, for me, the episode right above Mandalorian in the rankings is The Reckoning, which you had mentioned before.
Yep.
So for me, I thought the episode was a great bridge to the season finale where Din ends back up on Navarro because Grief Karga's offered him protection in exchange for helping get rid of the Empire. We see Grogu use his powers, which is like, oh, okay, that's what he can do. And then a couple weeks later, in real life, Rise of Skywalker comes out, which is like, oh yeah, they did that thing in Mando first. That's kind of cool.
Yep.
So we learned about that, and for me, the huge build up at the end, like the tension that they built, where Queel is trying to escape with Grogu, Queel gets killed, Moff Gideon shows up, and they just did a phenomenal job setting up the suspense for the next episode. This episode was written by Favreau, directed by Deborah Chow. So yeah, I thought The Reckoning was phenomenal. It was pretty great at the end.
I loved it. And I think the only thing that I had negatively about it was like, okay, Kara, we get it. He thought there were 4 troopers, and you mention it like 4 times. Like we know there are more than 4 troopers. Thank you, Kara. We got it. Like that was the one thing that I had negatively about the episode. But the rest of it was awesome. I agree with you. I love the setup. I love seeing more ideas of how the Empire looks after Return of the Jedi. The introduction of the Outland TIE is awesome.
Yeah. So what was next for you? What's in 6th place?
You mean 11th?
11th, yeah.
In 11th, I have The Believer.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about that one then.
Yeah, so the reason I have, like, again, I'm going to beat a dead horse with this, but these are all really close. So it sounds weird that I have The Believer down here in 11th, but I put it down here just because there were something, it wasn't as high up for me around the other episodes that it came out with in season 2. That doesn't mean it's a bad episode, though. I love the episode. I love how it gets more philosophical, existential, which is awesome. I love seeing that in Star Wars. And I don't know. It's a bit lower on my list, but that doesn't mean it's bad. A bunch of these are all like, if I could put them all in the exact same place, I would.
So I think for me right now, or comparing our rankings, I have The Believer 3 spots higher than you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably our biggest difference so far in the rankings.
Yeah.
And I have it a little bit higher up because although it may not look like it based off of where I put The Mandalorian and The Child. So to me, there are 3 different types of episodes we have here, if I were to categorize them. One is side quest episodes. Another is big story episodes. And the third category is new character episodes. So like your Ahsoka episodes, your Bo-Katan episodes, stuff like that. And granted, yes, like each episode has a little bit of other elements in there, but at the end of the day, if I had to categorize them, I would put it in there. And I value the big story episodes more than the other ones. So for me, I have The Believer a little bit higher because I thought this was one of the best episodes where we got to see what's going on in Din's head. Now, granted, it's also because we can see Din's head for quite a while in this one.
Yeah, it's cool.
And like the 2 times we've seen, no, 3 times actually that we've seen Pedro Pascal's face in here, I'm just like, oh crap, I forgot that's Pedro Pascal under that helmet.
Uh-huh.
His acting with just using his eyes, or like turning his whole head because of his eyes, is phenomenal. I thought Mayfeld was a fantastic character in this episode.
Oh yeah, like I said, I hated the prisoner because of the characters. Mayfeld did not help that for my ranking of the prisoner, but he's so much better here. He starts off, same old, insulting people, like, "Hey Mando, take your helmet off. Hey, it's a lot cooler down here if you take a helmet." Like all that normal stuff you remember hearing in the prisoner. But he gets so much better. You get to see inside his head, like, he used to serve the Empire. What does it look like when you used to serve the Empire? To these people, Empire, New Republic doesn't matter. He really gets the conflict more than you'd think because, he served the Empire, then walked away, then was arrested for attacking the New Republic. So he's seen a lot of stuff.
So let's move on to number 10. So what did you have at number 10?
At number 10, I have The Mandalorian.
Okay. All right. And so we already talked about that.
Yep.
So for me, I had Sanctuary.
I have Sanctuary at 9, so let's talk about that. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, pretty close there for us.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, Sanctuary is my favorite of the side quest episodes of season 1.
Same.
So the side quest episodes for season 1 I would consider was Sanctuary, the Gunslinger, and the Prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrap in the Reckoning and Redemption as like big story episodes.
Well, you could also consider Sanctuary as Cara Dune's character episode, because that's when we first meet her.
So for me, I had Sanctuary at number 10 because I immediately loved the on-screen chemistry between Din and Cara Dune. I'm not shipping them, but I'm just saying, like, their back and forth I immediately loved. I love the storylines of these tough guys helping a little village fight against an evil force, which we saw once in the Clone Wars. I really loved the concept design that they came up with for the ATST.
Oh yeah, this whole episode's gorgeous. It's the first episode in the series where it like randomly opens on something we've never seen before. It opens on blue shrimp. Like, What are these? Starts in just village we've never seen before, and suddenly it's getting pillaged by pirates. Like immediately, it just looks like a Clone Wars episode exactly brought to live action.
And I gotta give huge props. Some of the most beautifully designed episodes of the show are done by Bryce Dallas Howard.
Bryce Dallas Howard is one of my favorite directors in general, especially on Mandalorian. Both of her episodes are awesome.
So I really hope in the future BDH is handed like her own series, her own trilogy, just something, because she deserves a bigger role in Star Wars at this point.
Yeah, and I love the set design. I love the way the ATST looks terrifying. They make this thing that was treated as like, haha, it got knocked over by bears in, Return of the Jedi. Got knocked over by teddy bears. It's this thing that's so menacing because there's no weapons out here on this planet. We don't know how the ATST got there, but they can't fight against it. It's so much more powerful than just, krill farmers. They do a great job of making it look menacing and terrifying and like a massive challenge to take it down.
So that's what I had at number 10. What did you have it? You had Mandalorian at number 10?
Yeah, and Sanctuary at 9.
Okay, so with that being the case then, so we know what your number 9 is. For me, my number 9 is The Siege.
Okay.
So
I have The Siege way higher.
Really?
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I would say my top 5 are pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
My bottom 3 are pretty easy. In the middle, I could hear arguments for switching out either of them, in all honesty. So, The Siege, I thought was a really great episode. I love seeing Grief Karga basically be like the proud godfather of Grogu.
Yeah, he's definitely graduated from like dude running the guild to a guy running a city.
A planet. I thought the action was phenomenal. I'm so happy that they gave this episode to Carl Weathers.
Oh yeah.
It was a lot of. At first, I was just like, "Wait, the Mythrol from episode 1 is in this? Like, what? Why?" And then he turned out to be hilarious, and I loved it. And
there's no
overall,
guardrail. Yeah.
The only complaint I have on this episode is just it's my fault because we had the heiress Then we had this episode. Then we had the Jedi. And, this episode was great, but my own dumb brain was just distracted the whole time. It's like, all right, when are we seeing Ahsoka? When's this happening? So, again, like, the only complaint I have is because of myself. So that's why it falls a little bit shorter than some of the others. But again, this episode's great. I have no complaints with it.
Yeah, and I have it higher because I wasn't kind of expecting Ahsoka the whole time, because I picked up on the pattern in this season. It's introduced in episode N. You see it again larger in episode N+2. For example, like something introduced in episode 1, you'd see in episode 3. Introduced in episode 2, seen in episode 4.
Yeah, and I just knew that this wasn't the Ahsoka episode because we knew this episode was directed by Carl Weathers, and we know the episode after that is directed by Dave Filoni. So we're just like, okay, do the math.
Yeah, that too. But yes, Siege for me is much higher.
Okay, so number 8 for me was The Believer, which we talked about before. Yeah, Believer for me was really high, just because I felt like it was one of the more existential episodes of the whole show.
For me, number 8 is The Heiress.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So Heiress for me is much higher, but you go ahead.
Yeah, so The Heiress is, of course, here because, the action is amazing. I love the set piece that Bryce Dallas Howard throws in there with remind me of the name of the ship.
A Gozanti cruiser.
So, the infiltration there is awesome. Being able to see just, a pod of Mandalorians actually working together for the first time in this show. We see the consort come to Din's rescue, but that wasn't as in-depth as what we're seeing here.
Yeah, and it's also because we're just like, holy crap, it's Bo-Katan.
Oh, yeah, and the surprise of Bo-Katan was awesome. It's the first Clone Wars character we ever see in live action, because she comes before Ahsoka. But yeah, I loved it so much. The only thing that I think held it back a little bit more was, one, so many other episodes that I was like, oh my goodness, where do I put these? I liked it a little bit better. Like the action itself, I liked it better than in the Heiress and stuff like that. But I don't know. Bo-Katan isn't my favorite character. I do still love her character. Just, you won't see her at number 1 in my top Star Wars characters list or something like that. I think that you can see a little bit of her villain side here, because she deliberately does not tell Din her actual full plans just to get him on board. And like I was complaining about earlier, her character can really be summed up in The Mandalorian by saying, Darksaber Mandalore. That's her character. That's all she cares about. There's nothing really else there for me, besides just her, being kind of her little snippy self from Clone Wars and Rebels. So I still really like seeing her, but I think her character could have had a bit more to it besides what we see in the Heiress and the Rescue.
So for me, I had this episode higher just because Bryce Dallas Howard did a phenomenal job bringing these Clone Wars elements to life. I thought the action was amazing. I thought the story was lackluster, but it technically for me, it's a new character episode, but at the same time, it's super side questy.
Oh yeah, I also really enjoyed seeing an actual seafaring ship in Star Wars. That was cool. Yeah. I realized after being able to watch both seasons back to back that, when Baby Yoda's eaten by the Mama Core, of course we're like, oh, Baby Yoda's dead or something.
Yeah.
But of course Baby Yoda's saved, but I realized the egg that was destroyed by the Mama Core was crafted by Kuiil. So that was the last little bit of Kuiil that we just lost because of freaking squid people.
Freaking Quarren. But for me, the episode's higher just because Bo-Katan's character is just like Darksaber Mandalore, Darksaber Mandalore. But deep down, there's a lot going on there that's interesting because we'd like to think of Bo-Katan as this hero. At the same time, she used to be part of Death Watch.
She was a villain, yeah.
Yeah, she burned down a village, and then in season 4, and then in season 5, she's like, no, I'm not letting an outsider rule Mandalore. What the heck are you guys doing? And helps Obi-Wan escape, find out that Satine's her sister. And then, years later, Sabine gives her the Darksaber because she's just like, you're the one person that's never wanted to let an outsider rule Mandalore. And then when we get to Mandalorian, we're kind of pondering, it's just like, does she think of the foundlings as outsiders? And then there's this dichotomy going on inside of her, if just does she want all of Mandalore united, or does she want all of Mandalore united under her? So I love the Heiress just because, holy crap, it's a Clone Wars character brought to real life. But I'll give shout out to Saw Gerrera for being the first one to do that.
No, yeah, you are right. Yeah, that is Saw Gerrera did it first.
But seeing like such a huge character and the implications that she brought on for the rest of the season, because we'll talk about Cobb Vanth in a minute, but this was a huge thing where it's just like, wow, who else are we gonna see here? Like, who else from animation are we gonna see here? So for me, the Heiress is a little higher. You'll see where. But that being said, let's move on to, I think, number 10.
7.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's 7th because we've done 10 so far. Okay.
Yes.
God, this is hard. I really should have numbered this. All right. So we're on 7.
Yeah. What do you have for 7?
So for me at 7th, I had the Marshal.
Me too.
Okay.
Yay.
So
speaking of talking about Cobb Vanth in a minute.
I knew he was coming up somewhere, but to put it simply, the thing about the Marshal is that it's just such a lovely episode. Like, we had a super fun story. We get to see more of Din and the Tusken Raiders. We're introduced to Cobb Vanth, which, like, going into the season, it was rumored that he might be in the season, but everyone was giving it, like, a 20% chance. Episode 1, we find out, it's entitled The Marshal.
Oh, yeah.
And the first thing I thought was, oh, my God, they really doing this, huh? Like, we're really about to see Cobb Vanth.
And as soon as One-Eyed Green Dude mentions that he has a contact for Mandalorian on Tatooine, I was thinking, okay, it's either Boba Fett or Cobb Vanth. And either way, I'm excited. So.
Yeah. And then we see Cobb Vanth walk in with the Boba Fett armor. We're just like,
doesn't fit him right. Yeah.
We're just like, oh my God, this is so good. The episode was loaded with learning about Cobb Vanth. It was amazing. We had this amazing showdown between Din and Cobb and the Tusken Raiders versus the Krayt Dragon. And then at the end, we get that actual confirmation. We're like, holy crap, that's Boba Fett.
I was watching it with my roommates when it first came out, and I actually jumped up from the couch and said, Boba Fett is alive! Like, I screamed. Yeah, other things I loved about this was, one, they used an IMAX camera to shoot the final thing. So, like, that's why, like, the aspect ratio changed as he was riding away on the speeder at the end of the episode. But yeah, like, I love this episode because it brings in so much from different outside of main Star Wars stuff. Like, of course, Cobb Vanth is canon, but he was canon in a book series. And the books are far less known than the movies and TV shows.
Because the thing about the books is that if Star Wars wants to do something in a TV show or a movie and they have to retcon a book, they do it immediately. Like, they will not hesitate to change that. Funny enough, part of Cobb Vanth's backstory is slightly retconned a little bit, how he got Boba Fett's armor. But still, it was just amazing to actually see something from the books influence one of the TV shows or movies. And I was just so happy. It's just like, this really, like, lets anything happen. Like,
yeah, and it happened again with Operation Cinder being mentioned in chapter 15.
This episode just meant so much, and it was such an amazing way to kick off a season.
Yeah, and the reason I have it a bit higher than some other ones, because, of course, we see things like the Heiress had stuff from Clone Wars. The Marshal had stuff from the Aftermath series, Cobb Vanth, but also the way that they go about killing the Krayt Dragon is straight out of KOTOR, which is the first time that's really been referenced. The game, anyway, not, of course, the Old Republic or the Knights of the Old Republic. But there's a side quest in one of the KOTOR games where you pull a Krayt Dragon out of a cave in Tatooine by blowing it up from below or inside, or it was something that happened like that. So yeah, it's pulled straight out of KOTOR, and that was awesome.
That just shows how much of a nerd Jon Favreau is, and it's amazing. I
Massive
love it.
Nerd.
So
just, maybe next stop Revan, maybe we're hoping.
We'll see. So coming in at number 6 for me then is The Rescue.
Okay, I have The Sin at number 6.
Okay, so for me, The Rescue. When we talked about it at the start of this, most of the episode I thought was good. It was decent. It could have been like a middle of the pack episode. And then, the final third where we now have the only thing that we know about the future of this show is Din got the Darksaber, and that's going to be a problem. I thought Luke Skywalker, as I've said many times, slightly disappointed it was Luke, but the way it was handled was phenomenal. And the closing of this chapter of the show with Din and Grogu, where Grogu ultimately sacrifices himself and throws himself into the second Death Star, taking Palpatine with him. That thought was phenomenal. But I mean, we don't really need to discuss this episode that much, just because we've talked about it so many times at this point.
And my where I put the rescue is much higher, just because I didn't have as much of an issue with some of the things that we brought up in that last episode. And this is one of the only episodes where, on both viewings of it that I did for, the first time I saw it and the second time watching through for the rankings, it made me tear up both times. So I put a lot of money into emotional impact personally, so I have it much higher. And the action sequences were awesome. Being able to see the culmination of everything we've been learning about for 2 years.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk about the sin?
Yeah. Let's talk about the sin. So I have the sin quite high. I'm not telling you how high yet.
Yeah, I mean, like the top 6 basically for me are all just like episodes that I absolutely love.
So I mean, go ahead. Tell me why you had the sin at number 6.
Yeah. So the sin originally, when I was going through season 1, the sin was my top pick for almost the entire season and for almost all of season 2. And so I love this episode so much. It's just that other ones that I liked a bit more came along during season 2. Mm-hmm. And besides one other season 1 episode, everything above the sin for me is all season 2. Yeah, I mean, I love the sin. It was basically the kind of culmination of the first 3 episodes. The series could have ended there. It could have been a 3-episode series right there of just a Mandalorian protecting little baby Yoda dude. But that episode really shows, in just the short amount of time that they were together, how much Din has compassion for other people. He's not just some faceless Mandalorian. He cares enough about Baby Yoda to break the guild code that he's been living by for who knows how long. He's willing to break that code, kill people to get to what he needs to do, and he even, his efforts forced the Mandalorians on Navarro out of the hidden consort to help protect him, which is huge considering that, there were, I'm sure, the one guy who was like, well, why are you using Imperial Beskar? How dare you, flirt with the enemy? Even he came up and was defending him because this is the way. Mm-hmm. So it just shows, the devotion behind that creed, the brotherly and sisterly bonds that they have within Mandalorians, and then just, getting to see Carl Weathers kind of be villain in this. Yeah, a bunch of stuff. Being able to see Dr. Pershing and the Kaminoan patch and seeing that he cares about his work more than his loyalty.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love this episode for a lot of the reasons you were saying, where we see that Din actually cares about something besides just the job and making money, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where he's willing to sacrifice just about everything for this child that he just met because we see him realize the right versus wrong. And Deborah Chow just did such a phenomenal job with this episode.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, we got to see something we never thought we would see, which was Mandalorians on screen fighting in live action. Mm-hmm. We figured it's just like with the show, it's just like, oh, it'll happen at some point. But at the same time, we didn't think it'd be this early.
Yeah.
So you had the sin then at number 6.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you have for number 5 then?
Number 5 for me is Redemption.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So number 5 for me was the Heiress. That's how high I had the Heiress. So why'd you have Redemption at number 5 then?
So for a while, this is the only other season 1 episode that beat out the sin for me. And it was, for a very long time, my number 1 episode. It is here only because other episodes I saw in season 2, I liked a little bit more. It is, it basically is a top pick for me. Just here because I liked a few other episodes more. And I put a lot of money, again, into emotional impact and into just pure action. I love Star Wars for its action.
Yeah.
And so, Redemption has some awesome, like I was saying earlier, culmination in the whole season this time instead of just that 3-episode arc with the sin. We see, IG-11 absolutely wrecking as he flies into the city, just stuff like that. But yeah, the only reason that it's down here is just because there were other episodes that I liked more than it, but more as in like a micron more or something. They're all even at this point, basically.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you where I had Redemption.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see in a minute. But I loved the Redemption, and I loved the sequence where IG-11 comes in, was amazing, and that opening action sequence outside the bar was everything that I wanted out of the show. Like everything I expected from it, I should say. I didn't think we would ever see Ahsoka Tano and Bo-Katan in live action, let alone Cobb Vanth. But as for what I expected from the show, that was what I expected.
Yeah, I also appreciate that it opens up with just some comedy to help kind of ease us out of the fact that we just saw Queel die at the end of the last episode.
Exactly. And I thought the moment with Din and IG-11 where he takes off the mask and it's just like, yeah, it's Pedro Pascal. I don't know what I was expecting anything different. I thought maybe he'd be blue or something. And it's just like, what the heck was I expecting here?
Mm-hmm.
He's just a guy. Din overcoming his hatred of droids, followed by some cool stuff involving the armorer, which a lot of people think she could actually be a villain later down the line. That's another topic for another day.
Yeah.
I thought IG-11 sacrificing himself and all the emotion that scene brought, where 20 minutes ago, Din hated this droid and thought all droids were bad. And then you see him there in the boat. He's just like, no, I don't want you to do this. We see him overcome that hatred.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, an astromech with legs and arms is just standing there. And we're like,
yeah, that was weird.
We're like, what the heck? Then, we have this awesome action sequence where Din tries to take down Gideon and the TIE fighter. Team Mando thinks that Gideon is dead. We're all saying they're like, nah. And then Din's just like, all right, I guess I got to go find Jedi, whatever that species is, because at that point he thought the Jedi were a species. And then we see that big reveal where Gideon at the end comes out in the Darksaber. As soon as I heard the sound of it powering up, I was like, oh, we're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many moments of this show where there's just implications as to what not only the Mandalorian wants to do with the future, but the future of the Star Wars shows, where you hear that Darksaber power up and you're just like, that just opens a realm of possibilities. Like, are we going to Mandalore? Who are we going to see next? Bo-Katan, Sabine, all this stuff.
Yeah. Maybe I have Redemption a little too low, but I'm going to stick with it at this point.
But I mean, like you said before, there's so many that are so high on this list. So with that being said, what's your number 4?
Number 4, I have The Tragedy.
Okay. I had The Tragedy a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about The Tragedy then.
Oh my goodness, do I love The Tragedy. It is just an entire episode full of action, except for the very beginning where we see the father-son bond between Din and Grogu is just so strong.
Yeah,
of course.
And we just know something's happening. It's just like they're opening with this cute stuff, and the episode's called The Tragedy. All right, what's about to go down?
Yeah, when I first was watching it, it opens with some awesome stuff with Din happily exclaiming "Dank Ferric" and whatnot, and it's like, boy, do I love these characters. And then the title card comes up and it says The Tragedy. You're like, no. What does this mean? I don't like this. It just kind of puts this in the back of your mind sense of dread for the entire episode. Being able to see an old Jedi temple, the way that Grogu interacts with it, how Din is so stubborn, he doesn't understand the force field won't let him through. The big thing, one of the biggest things for me is seeing Slave One fly across the sky.
Yep.
Oh, it was so great, because I didn't think that I wanted to see Boba Fett that bad, and then I really wanted to see Boba Fett that bad.
Yep.
Yeah, his entire character in this is great. His new theme that they kind of use here, that like chugging along theme that plays when he fires his mortar off to destroy the 2 transports.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much here, like Boba Fett, Fennec Shand is back, which of course we will see Fennec Shand in Bad Batch. So it's this episode ties into other things. We see the transports, which are the same style of the ones they use in The Force Awakens, which begins to tie the world together there. Boba Fett sees the Empire for the first time again after he was thrown into a Sarlacc pit. So many things happening here. Being able to see the fact that Din can lose. Not just work his way through getting beat up because he's not perfect and then eventually winning. He lost this battle. Grogu was stolen and they hopped into jump space out of the system. So
yeah. And they nuked the Razor Crest from orbit.
Yeah, Razor Crest is dead. Yeah, this whole episode is just here's a little bit of fan service with Boba Fett totally wrecking things with both in his armor and out of it with a gaffy stick. And Din loses just about everything. He gets the ball to remind him of Grogu and the Beskar spear, but his rifle gone, his ship gone, his kid gone. So it's just it's such a different episode for the show, and it was a good shocking.
Yeah, this episode, to give it a slogan, it's just everything you thought was going to happen later down the road is happening right now. Because the first episode we had ever recorded of this podcast was the previous episode before it, the Jedi. And so we're just like, Boba Fett, yeah, he could be a villain for season 3. Din and Grogu making it to Tython, yeah, that'll happen at the end of this season. Dark Troopers, yeah, I think they'll come around and they'll go to Tython when they get there. Yeah, fam, we're seeing that all 1 week later.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I remember one of the biggest freakouts I ever had with this show was like, all right, granted, chapter 9, the first episode of the season, we saw Boba Fett. I was just like, yeah, okay, it's on Tatooine. I could kind of see that happening. But it's just like, they're just sitting there on Tython, and then we see the Slave One fly by. It's just like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And then that was the first of many of those moments I had in this episode. And then we see Boba Fett, and he's just like, you have my armor. Which at the end of the episode, we find out Boba Fett is a Mandalorian, I guess.
Yeah, it's confirmed that Boba and Jango are Mandalorians. He was a foundling just like Din, just like Grogu. So, yeah.
And we see Boba Fett have like a code of honor. He's just like, I told you I would help you get the child back in exchange for the armor. Well, I need to fulfill that promise. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, we see the Razor Crest get nuked from orbit, which for me is, as weird as it is to say, to me, it's the most tragic thing that happened in this episode.
Because like we knew he was going to reunite with Grogu again at some point.
Yeah, but it's just like when you lose something, you always have something to fall back to. And in this instance, Din had nothing to fall back to. He lost basically his home. He just met these random people, and he's just like, I guess I have you now, and that's all I have. I have this spear, I have my armor, I have this trinket. That's it.
Yeah.
Let's go do this. So I have this episode higher, and you'll see where it is in a minute.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, these are all kind of switching around and whatnot because, they're all so high.
So I guess then after this, you had that at what, number 5?
That was 4 for me. Tragedy was number 4.
Okay. So with that being said, we only have one other episode to talk about. So where did you have the Jedi at number 1?
Well, we'll get to that. I want to go through the rest of it. What did you have for 4?
Okay. Well, going back, I guess I need to figure this out. So at number 4, I had the Jedi.
Okay.
So where did you have it for you then?
What did you have for number 3?
Number 3, I had the Sin. That's how high I put the Sin.
Got it. Okay. For number 3, I had the Siege. That's how high I put the Siege.
Really?
Yeah.
You had the Siege that high?
Uh-huh. I do.
Wow. Okay. Mm-hmm. At number 2, I had the Tragedy.
Nice. I had the Rescue at number 2.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, I had the Jedi at number 1.
You had the Jedi at number 1.
Yep.
Okay. I had Redemption at number 1.
I assumed you did. Yeah. Just by the way you were talking about it. But yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I have Jedi at number 1 is because I absolutely love Ahsoka Tano. Now, of course, she's just another character in Clone Wars, right? Well, personally, I had, heard of Star Wars. I had watched the original trilogy. I was going to watch the sequel trilogy as it was coming out in theaters and everything. And I'm like, yeah, Star Wars is cool. But I never really, looked into it past the movies and everything. I began to actually look into and watch the prequels. I'm like, I like these movies. They're pretty good, despite, Lucas's writing. But I mean, the prequels helped me really learn to appreciate Star Wars more. And then I watched the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars helped make Star Wars this massive part of my life that it is now. And of course, that's Ahsoka Tano in almost every episode there. So Ahsoka is a very big, important character in my brain. And also, just the setting. I love Asian-inspired culture, things like that. So the setting was awesome. The way that it showed the Magistrate destroying the world for Thrawn was there.
Yeah.
The mention of Thrawn, the mention of basically this, hey, remember all these shows you watched when you were a kid and that got you to love Star Wars? Well, we're bringing all of them up now because I also love Rebels. This being able to see, a Jedi versus a Mandalorian, something that we don't really get to see much, if at all, in, Clone Wars and Rebels. This looking into how the Force works, where this time, this episode we get the Force as an energy field, where last episode we got the M count thing. So we get both explanations back-to-back episodes, depending on how you like to think about it. The attack on the city was phenomenal. The way that they set it up, where there's the Western-style duel outside the inner gate, and within the inner gate there's the samurai-style duel, a la Kill Bill, between the Magistrate and Ahsoka. The fact that the Magistrate could be a Night Sister or the other race we talked about in our first episode. Just the world building and the fact that Dave Filoni did this because he absolutely knows how to do Ahsoka Tano. There's also these big old like Avatar: The Last Airbender vibes, which Filoni also worked on, and was also a show that was huge in my childhood. And basically, the whole thing was just hey, remember Star Wars and why you love Star Wars, all the nostalgia about it? Here's one full episode of just the best parts of Star Wars for you. And so that's why I have it as number one, is because basically everything about it is something that I love about Star Wars.
So for me, I love this episode because my experience with Ahsoka is different than yours, but much like many, where I started watching Clone Wars in 2008 when it came out. I had been a Star Wars fan, a huge Star Wars fan for a couple years now. Had so many Legos, watched the movies on repeat, which all we had was 1 through 6. That's all we had.
Yeah.
I was a kid. I was just like, I'm going to start watching Clone Wars. I thought Ahsoka was okay, but as I grew up with her, I started to fall in love with the character. So this was a moment that I never thought was ever going to happen, and it blew me away when it did. And this episode is a love note to Clone Wars fans and Rebels fans. It's just like,
and her upcoming show is an entire show dedicated to them.
it's a love note, a great plot continuer, and a spin-off episode all in one.
It is a love note, but this is the opening paragraph. This is the thesis sentence, and then we have Ahsoka for the rest of the letter. You know?
Yeah, and the only reason, you went over all the reasons why I loved the episode. You already covered that. The other emotional attachment I have to this episode is that this episode came out and we recorded our first podcast.
Yeah, so that also helps that I have this tied to it too.
Yeah, like if we're still doing this for years to come, we'll be able to go back and say like, hey, the Ahsoka Tano episode of The Mandalorian got us started here. And the only reason why I have it in fourth place compared to the others is that it's not a complaint. It's just a statement that like this kind of had side quest vibes in regards to the story. I thought the story was okay. Now, granted, it was technically the end of Din's quest where he's just like, hey, found a Jedi, take the kid. But then she's just like, no. You're going to do something for me, and then I may do something for you.
Yeah, this is the last episode in the chain of help me and I'll help you. 5 episodes in a row. Yeah, I will give it that.
Basically, that it's not a complaint. That's just my explanation for why mine's at number 4. So, with that being said, what are some of the trends that you noticed and how you ranked things?
I noticed that I put, half of season 2 up in my top 4. My top 4 are all season 2 episodes. But I mean, in general, the way that I rank things, usually it goes down to how much do I like the action and the, I guess, cinematography, because I love some of the shots that were taken in the Jedi as well. Though that isn't as big of a ranking factor for me because I don't know to look for that kind of stuff. I'm not super trained in like what kind of shots are they using, how do these shots flow together, stuff like that.
Yeah, for me it's just like, do I like that shot? Yeah, all right, I like it.
Yeah, it's like, do I like the action? Do I like the world building? Because, I mean, world building is also a massive part of Star Wars for me, which is another reason why the Jedi is awesome, because it pulls in so many other things to this one episode. It pulls on world building and adds to world building, just like Clone Wars did, just like Avatar: The Last Airbender did. Not, of course, for Star Wars, but for its own canon. But yeah, other than that, that was basically my trend. And then other things that I noticed was season 2 overall I liked more, and I thought had more consistent episodes. Of course, there was the one bomb, the passenger, but everything else we have ranked very high. Like my lowest season 2 episode is The Believer, but that doesn't mean it's bad.
Besides the passenger.
Yes, besides the passenger. Passengers, of course, in last. But
so for me, some of the things I noticed. So actually, besides the passenger, the lowest ranked episode of season 2 for me is The Siege, which you had very high.
I had very high, yes. I loved The Siege a lot.
I think the only controversial one that I had in there, besides maybe The Siege, I don't know what everyone else thought of it. It's still a fantastic episode. For me, with me having the rescue a little bit lower than some people, like, according to IMDb, this is the highest rated episode of the show. It's a 9.9 out of 10. Which Ozymandias from Breaking Bad is still the only 10 out of 10 episode on IMDb, just saying.
Both have Giancarlo Esposito in them.
Oh, yeah. That just shows how good he is. So maybe Kevin Feige should call him up about playing Dr. Doom. Anyways, so I noticed that I liked, when it came to the rankings, I loved the story episodes more than I loved the incorporating new character episodes. So for me, like when you look at my top 3 episodes or top 5 episodes, the top 3 episodes are all heavy story episodes. Redemption, the tragedy, the sin. Now the tragedy had, our first real look at Boba Fett and what he can do. But still, for the most part, those top 3 episodes are all some of the biggest story episodes of the show. And then for number 4 and 5 are the Ahsoka Tano and Bo-Katan episodes. So that's just something that I've thought all along, really, is that I value heavy story more than I do the new characters, which I love the new characters. And seeing them brought to live action just makes me so happy and so excited for the future.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, at the end of the day, Star Wars is about the storytelling.
Yeah.
So do you have anything else to say before we wrap up here?
I just want to go through and go from 16 to 1 for both of us.
Okay.
So I'll start.
Yeah, that's right.
From 16 to 1, I have the passenger, the prisoner, the gunslinger, the child, the reckoning, the believer, the Mandalorian, sanctuary, the heiress, the marshal, the sin, redemption, the tragedy, the siege, the rescue, and the Jedi.
And for me, going from bottom to top, I had the passenger, the gunslinger, the prisoner, the child, the Mandalorian, the reckoning, sanctuary, the siege, the believer, the marshal, the rescue, the heiress, the Jedi, the sin, and the tragedy. And then followed by my number 1 episode, Redemption.
Yeah, so my number 1 episode as well was the Jedi, and then both of our number last was the passenger.
Yep.
But yeah, I am so excited for even more episodes to add into our ranking.
Yeah, we're gonna have to find a way to incorporate them into there.
Yeah.
But with that being said, thank you all for tuning into this week's episode of the R&S Podcast. You're listening to Randy and Savage. We hope you tune in next week, where I'm very excited to say we are doing a complete 2021 roadmap. So this is a project I'm putting together where I'm going to incorporate all the Star Wars, Marvel, and DC projects that we know are coming in 2021. I'm going to wrap them all in together, and I'm going to lay out a calendar from January to December, what to expect each month. So that being said, thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, I hope you all have a great end of your year. This is our last episode for 2020, so we'll see you in 2021.
All right. Bye.
See ya.